Hmm. Where we left off last time, there was a bit of a mystery starting with secret passageways, a broken vase, and someone named Gaia accused of breaking it. Let's see what happens next. Chapter 7. Enter the Cyclops. "You must take on the case," I said to Thrax as we slipped out of the kitchen. Mistress Fotini had led us out of her room through the secret passage, reminding us to put the bread basket back in place. Thrax looked at me defiantly. "Why should I? Mistress Fotini can get another slave to do her bidding." I filled a cup of water for both of us, and we took them out to the yard. "I heard you talking in your sleep back home in Athens. You said you wanted to find your mother in Thrace when you have enough money. Well, now's your chance. Mistress Fotini said she'd pay you in gold. With your keen eye for detail and your intelligence, you'll have the reward under your belt in no time, and you could go on solving mysteries for other people until you have all the money you need. Before you know it, you'll be rich and free." "I don't need help from wealthy slave owners," snapped Thrax. "I'll find another way to make money." "How?" I said. "By becoming a thief yourself? Slaves don't get that many opportunities to gain riches. Besides, you wouldn't just be helping Mistress Fotini, you'd be saving Gaia too. Remember how angry you were when Master Xenon said he was going to sell her?" Thrax didn't reply. A faraway look came into his eyes, and I knew he was thinking hard. We sat in the shade of a vine, and I sipped the cool water. The sun rose higher in the sky, poking its hot rays through the vine, but I didn't dare move. I didn't want to disturb Thrax while he was thinking. Above me the swallows twittered as they darted in and out of the holes in the courtyard walls, and the doves cooed on the window sills. At last Thrax opened his eyes again. "You're right, Nico," he said. "This might be my only chance to make some money and buy freedom for my mother and myself. I'll take on the case on 2 conditions." I looked at him puzzled. "What?" "The first is that you'll be my assistant," said Thrax. "I'm going to need a lot of help if I'm to solve this mystery. The second is that you write about the case. If I have a talent for solving problems, you have one for writing." Write about solving mysteries? Now, why hadn't I thought of that? I was pretty sure no author in Hellas was writing mystery stories. This could be the perfect opportunity for me to make my mark in the world of storytelling. "By the writing hand of Cadmus, it's a deal," I said. We shook hands to seal the agreement, and Thrax suggested we beg some cooking wine off-cooked to celebrate. She'd just come back from the market with the shopping, a short woman, round as a water jug with dark hair cropped close to her head. She spoke with a strange accent which Thrax said marked her out as a woman from Phrygia, a land to the east of Hellas. One of his friends at the farm near Thebes had also come from the same country. She gave us not only wine, but hunks of stale cake to dip it in, too. "There's no symposium tonight," she said, as we helped her put away the shopping. "Master Xenon is taking part in a secret ceremony out in the woods. He's invited your master to go along with him. It's a very hush-hush ceremony for rich men only. No boys allowed. All slaves in the house have the night off, so there's only the 3 of us for supper tonight. I'll make a special treat from back home, rabbit stew with beans." She poked me gently in the tummy and laughed. "You look like you enjoy your food, and your friend here needs more of it to keep his muscles big and strong." I was delighted to hear we were in for a lavish banquet, and that the house would be almost deserted. It gave Thrax and me the chance to let Mistress Fotini know he was taking on the case. Master Ariston came back from the sacred spring, wanting to be pampered and perfumed. For the next few hours, Thrax was kept busy heating water, scrubbing his spotty back, and rubbing him down with perfumed oil till he smelt like cherry blossom. When at last both masters were ready to leave, Amos brought round a horse-drawn carriage, and they disappeared down the scrubby road. We had our dinner out in the courtyard, with cook refilling our bowls the moment we emptied them. The stars were twinkling in the sky by the time we finished the meal, and cook belched loudly. Thrax offered to wash the dishes, and she retired to bed in a small chamber off the kitchen. When we could hear her snoring, I pushed aside the bread basket, and we crept into the secret passage. A few minutes later we had scaled the ladder, and I rapped on the secret door. Mistress Fotini answered it. "Welcome back," she whispered, "but I'm afraid we'll have to be quiet. Pandora is sleeping in the room next door." She lit a small lamp and placed it carefully on a three-legged table. "Nico's convinced me to take on the case," said Thrax, settling on the stool he'd sat on earlier. "But I need to convince myself that Gaia is innocent. When can I speak to her?" "Right now," replied Mistress Fotini. She went to the chest with the Medusa lock and carefully pulled it open. There was a rustle of linen as a little girl stood up. She peered around the room with big, frightened eyes. "These boys are friends," said Mistress Fotini gently. "They're going to prove that you didn't break Mistress Pandora's wedding vase." Gaia stepped out of the chest shyly, watching Thrax and I as if we were foxes about to pounce on a duckling. She looked younger than her mistress by a couple of years, with skin that glowed almost like glass in the lamplight. I guessed she was Syrian, or perhaps Egyptian, like Amos. "This boy wants to ask you some questions," Mistress Fotini explained. "His name is Thrax, and his friend here is Nico." Gaia looked from me to Thrax, then lowered her gaze to the floor. "I promise I didn't smash Mistress Pandora's wedding vase, sir," she said softly. "You don't need to call me sir," said Thrax. "I am a slave like you. Now tell me what happened." "It was starting to get dark," began Gaia. "Mistress Pandora ordered me to light the lamps in her room." "Why did Mistress Pandora ask you to do that?" asked Thrax. "Doesn't she have a personal slave of her own?" "Yes, her name is Calliope," said Gaia, "but she was taking a long time choosing a necklace." "We invited a Persian merchant woman to come and show us her jewelry," explained Mistress Fotini. "She specializes in ornaments for weddings. Father said even the slaves are to have necklaces for the wedding. We were all in the Kynikion choosing pieces when the accident happened." Thrax smiled at Gaia. "So you'd chosen your own necklace for the wedding, and Mistress Pandora sent you to light the lamps in her room. Was the window open when you went in?" "Yes." "As you know, it was hot last night," said Mistress Fotini. "We had the windows in the women's quarters wide open to let in the breeze." "And we wanted to hear the sound of the party downstairs," added Gaia. "Was there anyone in the room when you went in?" asked Thrax. Gaia shook her head. "No one." "And where was the vase?" "It was on the linen chest in the corner. I didn't need to get close to see how beautiful it was. The moonlight from the window made it glow so brightly I could see the picture on it from across the room. It was such a pretty picture. There was a wedding cart with horses taking the bride to her new home. She looked just like Mistress Pandora. A groom was driving the cart. He was as handsome as I imagined Prince Theseus was. And there were children in the picture too, waving and cheering. It must be very exciting riding on a wedding cart to your new home. I want to be a bride one day." "Did you not wonder if there might be something inside the vase?" asked Thrax. "I'm always tempted to look inside a pot, in case there's something in it." "Gaia knew the vase was empty," Mistress Fotini put in. "We both watched Mother unpack it." Thrax nodded and turned to Gaia again. "So you were standing across the room in the dark, dreaming of the day when you too will be a happy bride. What happened next?" "I heard a grunt," said Gaia. "I looked round and there was a horrible-looking man climbing through the window. He didn't see me because I was standing in the dark, but I saw him. Ugh! He smelt like an open tomb when we go to pay our respects at the graveyard." "Why didn't you scream when you saw him?" asked Thrax. Gaia's eyes filled with tears. "I tried, but no sound came out of my mouth." "That does tend to happen when we get very scared," said Thrax gently. "What did you do next?" "Nothing," said Gaia. "I was so terrified I felt as if I'd turned into a statue. The thief picked up the wedding vase, and I think it slipped out of his hands. I couldn't see properly because he had his back to me. The crash was so loud it made him jump. Then he grabbed one of the pieces of broken pottery and disappeared out of the window. Calliope ran into the room a few moments later. She screamed when she saw the broken vase, and that made me scream too. Then Mistress Pandora came running down the corridor. I told her about the thief smashing the vase, but when we looked out of the window there was no one in the lane. So I got blamed, and now I must be sold." Father won't sell you, I promise, Mistress Fotini comforted her, squeezing Gaia's hand and giving her a honey cake from a small dish. I won't let him do it. She turned to Thrax. I'll take her to the temple of Aphrodite tomorrow. The priestesses will give her sanctuary until you catch the thief. I donate a lot of money to the temple because I'm going to be a priestess myself when I grow up. They wouldn't dare refuse me. Was there anything else in the room that the burglar might have been tempted to steal? Asked Thrax. Yes, Mistress Fotini answered for her slave. Jewelry and some money, but the thief didn't notice them. He must have panicked when he smashed the vase. Did you get a good look at the thief's face? Thrax asked Gaia. If you saw him again, would you recognize him? Oh, yes, replied Gaia without hesitation. He had a terrible face with only one eye. He was a Cyclops. There was a silence in the room as we all thought about Gaia's statement. Seeing a Cyclops can be terrifying, said Thrax at last. And she did notice some other things about him. Mistress Fotini nudged Gaia. Go on, tell Thrax and Nico. He was really huge and tall, whispered Gaia, and I noticed his arms when he reached for the vase. They were covered in horrible scars. You've had a horrible experience, said Thrax, but don't be scared any more. Nico and I are going to find him and bring him to justice. Have you told this to anyone else? Gaia hung her head. Only Master Xenon, and he doesn't believe me. He thinks I've made the story up. Thrax turned to Mistress Fotini. You must take her to the temple at once. We'll be in touch again soon. Good night. Mistress Fotini led us out of her room, and we stole back to our sleeping corner in the storeroom. The house was still silent. The male slaves had not yet come back from their night in town. I fetched a snack of walnuts and raisins to help us think while Thrax lit a lamp. And then we had our first ever secret meeting. How were we to go about tracking down the thief? Chapter 8, our first secret meeting. I'll take notes, I said to Thrax. Writing things down always helps me sort them out in my head. I fished out my wax tablet, which I always keep under my bed along with a stylus. Are you sure Gaia didn't smash the vase and make up the story about the Cyclops? I have to admit, it does sound a bit fanciful. I am certain she's innocent, replied Thrax. Why? She hasn't the imagination to make up a story about a Cyclops. She's telling the truth. But it couldn't have been a real Cyclops. There's no such thing. It must have been a man in a mask. Perhaps, said Thrax. I wish we could inspect Mistress Pandora's room. The thief might have left some clues. There'd be no footprints, Thrax assured me. It hasn't rained recently, so the ground would be too dry for mud. And even if the Cyclops did leave any traces of his visit, the slaves would have cleaned them away by now. They scrub the rooms every morning. That leaves us very little to go on. If only the thief were a real Cyclops. It would be very easy to find a one-eyed man, even in a city as big as Corinth. But Gaia gave us some very strong clues, said Thrax. 4 to be precise. They're enough to unmask the thief and bring him to justice. I thought back to our conversation with Gaia. She said the thief smelt like a corpse. I said, I'll write that down. It sounds important. I scratched smells like a corpse in the wax tablet. She didn't say corpse, Thrax corrected me. She said like an open grave. There's a big difference. I scratched out corpse and wrote like an open grave. What does an open grave smell like? Said Thrax. Damp, I replied. Musty. Thrax nodded. And what kind of person would smell musty? Someone who works with damp earth. A brickmaker who makes mud bricks, perhaps, or a grave digger. And then there are the scars, continued Thrax. Clue number 2. What kind of person would have lots of scars all over their arms? Someone who sharpens knives and tools for a living? I used to help cook on the farm bake bread, said Thrax. Often, when she reached into the hot oven for a loaf, she'd accidentally brush her arm against the edge of the oven door. The hot clay left burn marks on her forearm that turned into scars. Her right arm was laddered with them. So, are we looking for a baker? I wondered. Bakers smell of baked bread or fermenting yeast, said Thrax. This one reeks of damp earth. I reckon it's clay. That smells musty. The thief must handle clay so much it leaves a smell on his skin and clothes, and he works with an oven that has clay objects in it. A potter's kiln! I'd never thought of jugs and vases going into an oven, but in fact they're baked or fired to harden the clay. So are we looking for a potter? I asked. We're looking for a potter's assistant, said Thrax, most likely a slave. It's the assistant's job to put the pots in the kiln and pull them out again when they're fired. But if the thief works for a potter, why did he break into a house to steal a wedding vase? Why not just steal one from his own place of work? Wouldn't that be easier? Stealing from his own place of work would be too risky. He'd be the first suspect, said Thrax. I wonder how the thief knew there would be a wedding vase in Master Xenon's house, I said. Peleus the merchant must have a local agent. The agent takes orders from rich clients in Corinth, and Peleus supplies the vases from Athens. The thief might work with the agent and have heard about the wedding vase. He might even have planned the theft before the vase reached Corinth. I wrote the rest of the clues in my tablet before showing it to Thrax. So, we're looking for a thief who, 1, is a potter's assistant, 2, is tall and hulking, 3, smells of wet clay, and 4, has distinctive scars all over his arm, most likely the right one. Those are the 4 clues Gaia gave us, but how do we go about finding a potter's assistant in one of the biggest cities in the world? It's like looking for a drop in the ocean. The man probably works for Peleus's agent, Thrax reminded me. The first thing to do is find out who that is. Suddenly, he stopped talking and looked around the room. Shh, he whispered, putting a finger to his lips. He tiptoed to the door and yanked it open, but there was no one outside. And after peering out into the yard, he closed it again. I thought I heard someone outside the room. We're going to have to be very careful when we discuss the case. There's also the possibility that someone in this house might be in league with the thief. Just then we heard banging at the front door. The other slaves had come back from their night out. I slipped the wax tablet under my bed. Our first secret meeting was over. Who could this Cyclops be? A potter's assistant? A baker? Someone with burns? We'll find out in the next segment.